Well, thanks everyone for coming today to our first DMs conference. Appreciate you all coming out today. Hopefully we'll give you some really good information today that you can use. Primarily this first one is kind of geared towards new game masters, but I mean experienced game masters can probably get maybe some tips and ideas. Basically the way it's going to run today is we have a few topics, some general topics that we're going to cover about basically how to start a game, just some tips and ideas for ways you can do that, get started, maybe some tools and so forth that you can use, some reference material. We have some things to give out today for everyone that's attending. We actually have a zip drive that has a lot of DM tools on it and stuff that we're going to give you that some of us use in our games now. Some of them we actually just discovered as we were doing some of the research, so we're going to be using them ourselves. But hopefully this is something that we can turn into an ongoing event and actually maybe delve into some more specific topics in some of the future ones and actually have some like workshops and classes. But what we'd like to do in the future too is maybe even have some like small games and stuff and actually do like training classes with people that want to run games and so forth. And kind of, that way you can have other people that are involved kind of give you feedback and, ideas and stuff as you actually run a game. So that's what we're wanting to do in the future. We're trying to involve everybody in the Central Valley. We have some good connections with like Crazy Squirrel in Fresno, and they're heavily involved in RPGs, especially Pathfinder and that kind of thing. So they have a Pathfinder Society group that they run up there. And they do some stuff with the library up there too. They have a big RPG conference that they do up there where it's all day just running RPGs and stuff like that. So we're trying to get her involved too, so there's some stuff that will probably be coming up in the future. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to kind of cover the topics. Each of us are going to kind of talk about a little bit about each of the specific topics. What we can kind of do, we can kind of keep it open. If there's questions as you go, that's good. We want to kind of run through it, but at the end we are going to have a Q&A. So if there's some specific things you'd like to ask, that's great. All of us have different play styles. We're running different types of games. We're not specific. We're kind of heavy. You'll see it's heavy Dungeons and Dragons, but we want to try to give some really general. The skills that you use in D&D, you can use in any game master, as a game master in any other game. You come up against the same kind of issues and problems and stuff like that you might when you're running a game. But primarily, all of us run Dungeons and Dragons, and at various different types too. So you're going to get some pretty good perspectives of of what it entails. So we have Brian Mears over here. He's a long time DM. We got Desmond. I think everybody knows Desmond. Drew Hallam. He's actually running a game right now at school. He has an RPG club that he's doing in school. So he's getting some really good experience with brand new people that are playing. So that should be really interesting. I'm one of the co-owners of Paladins Game Castle. I actually run a private game myself, and been doing it for a lot of years since first edition. So, how do we want to? You want to start first?
Yeah, I'll start off.
Okay.
We'll do a little intro for everybody so you know a little about us. I started D&D back in '82. Started playing, immediately started DMing, and right into high school is about 50% of my time. And right out of high school, that's basically all I've done is run games. I don't get to play much anymore. But I actually get a thrill off of running games, designing games, and seeing the enjoyment that other people get from them. I'm a visual-oriented DM. I'm very much involved with, that's what that is expressing right there. I like players to see what's going on, like the dungeon that's on the back of the table. I go out of my way to, it's a game of imagination whenever you do an RPG. But from my perspective, I like people to really get into it and get involved, and the more they can see, it kind of awakens more of what they're going to think of, what they're imagining, what everybody, and gets everybody on the same page is what's going on. Theater of the mind, which is just gaming off of what the game master tells you and what players perceive is going on, can be done fine, and so can using actual miniatures and scenery. It just depends on your play style versus the GM and the players, but that's mostly what I focus on. Desmond?
Yeah, I'm Desmond Blackstone. I've been running and playing D&D for roughly 8 years now, so I'm probably one of the younger ones here, and probably with the least amount of experience. But one thing I do heavily with my D&D games, much like Brian, is I use a lot of scenery I use a lot of props. But what I try and push the hardest when I play with my players is the use of technology. Whether it's sound effects, ambience, projectors that actually project the map down onto the table for you to see, just miscellaneous things like that. Anything that's new coming out, you know, I always try and look out for the latest and greatest to integrate into not only my personal D&D game, but any that I can trickle out into my colleagues' games here. Being a new gamer myself, I do my best to try and convert as many younger kids to try role-playing games in general, whether it's, you know, D&D, Pathfinder, you name it. And with my number of resources, I've been able to convert a good deal of players into playing just role-playing games in general. And one of my colleagues here is Drew.
All right,
Yeah, pass it to you.
I'm Drew Hallam. I have been playing D&D for probably about 16 years, probably since I was about the age of 12. DMing only for about 8. I know, I mean, stuff's really going to be repeated a lot, but I primarily just use a mat and draw stuff out. I do use a lot of minis. If I don't have something, I will try to make it up, print something out. I like setting some music sometimes, not always, because sometimes it can be a bit distracting if it can become too loud, but just creating that environment where they're going to come in and have their imaginations run wild as well as mine. Because more likely, the players are going to give you more ideas than you even had in the first place. And allowing them to, in a sense, take control. I mean, you're putting up those bumpers, like for bumper bowling. You're putting up bumpers for them, but, you know, they can always go off track, and that's not always a bad thing. Let them have fun. Chaos will ensue, and chaos can be good. But always trying to give a good and fun experience, but more importantly, a better story to tell. If your game has good storytelling, then essentially it'll almost play itself out.
I'm Curtis Lust, one of the co-owners of Paladins Game Castle. I've been playing since 1978, the first edition. This was my first box set that I played, Basic Edition. Back then, there wasn't a lot of tools. There was a lot of just a lot of hours and hours and hours of drawing dungeons out and creating dungeons and stuff like that. I'm heavily oriented, though, for a lot of years of just running modules. I'm really heavy into modules, adventure paths, and stuff like that, although I do modify them a little bit. But I like running that. They're simple to use, and there's a lot of really good ones out there right now, especially with Pathfinder and stuff like that. I like running the Pathfinder adventure paths. I'm primarily running the 5th edition now, which is, I believe, my personal opinion is it's the best ever. It's what D&D should have been all along. And I am running the Horde of the Dragon King adventure. I like using, I kind of go back and forth and mix with props and visual aids and stuff. I'm using the Sirenscape sound system now for background sounds and that kind of thing now, which is really a cool tool that you can use. I primarily just ran games. I probably only ever played in like maybe 4 games in like 30 years. I like running games. I've had some really good DMs I've played with. It's hard to stick with long-term campaigns, but I've had like maybe like 4 people that I played with that are probably, you know, the best DMs. It's hard to find a good group, but once you do stick with it, it's really worth it. But I think that's basically, yeah.
Good
intros. Mine.
All right, I'm going to start off with some key things you guys might want to jot down, things that I put a list out that, as a game master, things you're going to want to think about when it comes to running a game or putting together a game. First off, you're going to want to have fun. That's the first rule. It's got to be about fun for everyone at the table. It's everybody's game, not just the GMs or just the players. So ultimately, it's got to be a mixture of what everyone's looking for. You should know the rules a bit. You don't need to be a master. No DM has to grab all these books, have a stack of them, and memorize them. Far from it. You just got to at least have a gist of it, know where it's going. And if you like to make your own rules up, that's always fine. House rules is core of any RPG. Let the players know where you're coming from, though. If they don't understand the house rules, it's hard for them to immerse themselves in the game as much. And that's where the biggest disconnect I see from having house rules. Now, people have them. They just don't let the players know how things work. But they're expecting it to be by the book. It can go away from the book as long as they're aware of what's going on. Winging it as a DM, GMing it on the fly. Be prepared, it's going to happen. Don't be afraid of it. And embrace it, because some of my best sessions happened when we went right off the rails and I just let them go. I wasn't ready for it half the time, and I was like, all right, we'll just see where this is going. And most of the time, I try not even to lead on that they just left where I was all planning. And I just act like, oh yeah, this was planned the whole time. They love it, they don't know that, and then I listen to them. Players will give GMs more feedback and more stuff to work with, as Drew mentioned, than you have planned. You can plan for hours and hours. And while you're sitting there and they're talking amongst themselves, they'll start to conspire and talk about what's going on, what they think's going on, what the plot is, who's doing what. And before you know it, you've rewritten your entire adventure based upon the clues that they have just said right before you. So winging it can actually be really fun, and just have, I wouldn't say, don't plan ahead, but prepare. Be ready to go off in different areas and different things, and have little bits of stuff that you can pull in. And there's the 3 R's of RPGs. Rules is written, rules as they're intended to be, and rules is fun. So you start off like, this is how the rules go, and then as a GM, you're like, you know what, this is what they mean. Technically it may say this, but you understand the gist of what the game meant for you to do that. And then ultimately, if the rules start to hamper anyone's fun in the game, then the rules are in the way. And you can throw rules out at the point that as long as the game is fun for everybody, at least everyone's on the same page. And for running an RPG, I would say there's three pillars that support any RPG. You've got a social interaction part of the game, you've got combat portion part of the game, and you've got an exploration. And some games will be heavily on one versus the other two, or have a mixture of all three. But always having a little bit of all three somewhere, even if it's small parts, helps broaden the game out a bit. Anybody got anything want to chime in? I got a huge list. Okay.
I like big lists.
Knowing your limits as a GM, knowing what you can do and what you can't do. I learned that there's some things I'm not good at, some things I need to practice at, so I always try to work around what I'm really good at versus what I'm not. And the GM, it can be fun, especially if you get into NPCs, non-player characters that are opposition to the party, and you get behind them, you get in their head, you're trying to play them out. But the GM ultimately is a non-biased rule arbitrator. You're just there to tell a story. It's a cooperative storytelling process. So the players have just as much right to input in the game as the GM does. The GM's there as an ultimate rule arbitrator. No, this is really what would happen, and it should never get into the GM's mind, this is what I want to happen. Because it's not his game, it's everyone's game. But he still has a story he wants to tell, which makes sense. We want to get through it. But if things happen, just let it go the way it naturally goes. Don't have a predetermined set of this must happen. Which brings me to no untouchable adversaries. Even the big bad guy that you spent weeks writing about, if some fluke happens and the party drops a boulder on him and he's gone, it's time to get to rewriting and get creative of what's going to happen. Because sometimes the fallout of that, the GM is going to go, well, what would happen? So you got to think behind in your head. Well, in this game, what would the other character, what would the other NPCs do? What would the situation arise? Is chaos going to ensue? Are other people going to advise the power? You may not even know. So now the game, when that happens, the game is now fun for the DM because he's now like a player. He's like, I didn't know this was going to happen. This is exciting. Let's start making changes and see what will happen. And it's even better when the party doesn't know, though, that you are living off of this. Because when they start to see that things are going unplanned, for them, it's a little bit less excitement for some people. So if you can hide that as much as you can, like, yeah, this is where it's supposed to go. It's expecting all this. They're like, man, this is such an involved game. You can actually make them think you spent 30 hours of prep and you only spent 5.
Yeah.
You know, it pays off. Now, don't say no and determine difficulty. For the most part, players want to do something, depending upon what it is, let them try. You know, inevitably you're going to have someone want to do a Wile E. Coyote activity that are things that are outrageous and not, you know, not even possible in the means of physics, but You're going to have things happen, but if it's possible, even the slightest chance, and they want to try it, let them try. I mean, the repercussions are going to fall upon their character. But the fun of the game is the fact that there's no bounds, and that's what key to an RPG, a traditional RPG tabletop, which you don't get in a video game. There's no walls, there's no boundaries, there's no limits to what you can do. You know, the party is in a Wild West game. You decide to steal the train, and you manage it, and you drive it across, and it's loaded full of things, you know, treasure or whatnot. Jim's like, well, I had never planned for that. We'll go with it and see what happens. And the party can just do, you know, they crash it, and they run off, and they do something else. It makes all new avenues of adventure. Okay? And by limiting players and telling them what they can or cannot do, ruins the biggest aspect of a tabletop RPG versus a computer game. Because anyone can log in. Nowadays, we can do it on our phone. Computer games are so easy to do, so if you're stuck in a railroad and you can't get off and you're forced to do one action, it's not that rewarding for most people. So there's a lot of people that grow up just with video games now. Except they really don't know what the power of choice is. It's a player agency, where you have the ability to control your character's destiny. Games that allow that make everyone just have a much greater time, much greater experience. Talking about even if their character dies. And I had one player who always said, I don't care if my character dies, just as long as he goes out with some style. That's all that matters. Experience for a game. For handing out experience, all games have some form of experience. You've got your skill-based games, you've got your class-based games, your, what's that term, archetypes. But all games have some form of experience gathering where characters get better at whatever it is they're doing. And there's many ways to handle that. There's no right way, just as long as, again, the players understand how you as a GM are running the game. So, like with D&D, you know, there's XP, you kill a monster, you get XP. I mean, I've played back from when whoever killed the monster got the XP, no one else did. Or the group shares it. There's a person who doesn't show up, share an XP. Is the party flat? Do they all level at the same time? Is it story-driven? You know, you get to a certain point in the timeline, does everybody automatically just enhance or level up or get XP? So you get, just hand wave. The DM just like, I think it's time for everybody to level up. I've seen all of these in practice, and all of them have their, you know, their benefits and their negatives. And so as long as everyone knows and is on board with how it's doing. But there's no right way to do experience. And with me, I've gone to experience as a session thing. So I no longer do experience based upon the minutia that happens in the game, because I find it becomes a metagame in and of itself and forces actions characters would never do. Yeah. So I take experience off the table. It's not there. So my experience is when you show up, you get session XP. You showed up. Were you early this session? I'll give you a bonus. Did you bring food and drinks for everyone to share? You get a bonus. Were you taking notes?
Paid off the DM.
Yeah. Yes.
If you bribe a DM, you can probably survive that session.
I ate through high school like that. So when and the notes, I use Obsidian Portal, which is a website for managing campaigns. And I award bonus XP for everybody that takes notes and then logs into the website and updates the campaign. And it'll be the same session from 4 different people's perspectives logged in. And there's a forum on there, there's a wiki, I can put information, I can put maps of the campaign. Everyone gets in, gets involved, and they can chat about the game away from the game, which leads me into using media, multimedia, messaging systems and forums to communicate about the game outside of the game. I mean, back in the day in high school, we would call over the phone, be like, DM, this is what I want to do, my character between this and this, and I'd be taking notes over the phone and running the game all the time. Now you can literally do that and get email updates, messages, and if you find some type of software that allows you to handle that, like Obsidian Portal, it can make your game really grow.
Yeah, what's really cool about that, is that your game keeps going even when it's not actually in session. And I found that it keeps them involved. Because you may have times where you have to cancel a session during the week or something like that, and they kind of lose touch. They lose that excitement level. But if you can throw things at them in between, little campaign quirks, or even something that's happened specific to their character, I like to do that a lot. We'll email them, or we have a Facebook page that I always set up for our adventures, and everybody's in it. So I can send them a little message saying, hey, this is a dream you had last night, or if this something happened to your character on the side, and it keeps them involved, and it keeps them something special for them, and they're looking forward to that next session, so they can reveal that or take advantage of that or whatever.
Right, and it's all saved. It's easy to recall.
Exactly.
I just realized just now sitting here that my party has not forgot what happened last session in the last 3 months. Wow. I don't think I've seen that happen in the last 30 years.
Yeah.
Every time it's like, what did we do last week? I know.
Yeah.
Nobody knows. They've been working, they've had lives, and like, okay, then they spend 30 minutes just trying to rehash. Yeah. What did we do last week? Oh, that's right, you got 8. Oh, you got to get a new character, something like that. So using these multimedia ways of recording sessions and what's going on, now people can just go back up and look. That's what happened. Okay, I got it. Everybody's on the same page.
Yeah, exactly, because for players, if your player doesn't remember, then you can't remember. Because you can't just splice in random knowledge that your own character would not be, somehow able to grasp and just go, oh, that's right, I totally found this gem. No, you didn't. Who found a gem? What gem? Where's your notes? I didn't take notes. No.
Yeah, so using these multimedia services will really help the game grow. And so back to XP, I found that now no one worries about encounters. They don't worry about, I have to do this to get that. They come across, an ogre comes out, they're like, what can we gain from encountering this creature? Well, we could fight him, he could kill us. If we don't get XP for fighting him, he might have treasure, but I doubt he looks pretty poor. And I don't know what he's going to do with a gold piece. He doesn't go to his shop. So what does he have to do for it? It now puts the game, the metas out of the game. And now you've got characters acting like, let's just go around him. Really, let's not deal with that. And I love the way that's turning out the game, how it's changing it. So, but again, experience and how you award it, and every game is different, and every party and every group may want something different. So discuss it even as a group, as a GM, like, how do you guys want to do it? Here's some ideas I've got. What do you think? And then finding out that there's no right way to do it, just what your group wants to do, you can change your games completely. And the metagame brings me to the metagame. When people talk about the game as an aside, where they bring the fact that this is a game, they mention it. The more metagame there is, and the more inexperienced people are, the more that there's going to be. It happens, but the more you got to convince people that you don't want it, you want to get rid of it. Think of it in your character's perspective. Think of it everything. What do you know? What would you know? The metagame I don't know. People don't realize how much it's not enjoyable until it leaves. And I was a huge metagamer when I was an early gamer. I started playing with better players, role players. It was just all about their character, and putting their characters and totally. I'm only thinking about what does he know, what is like actors. What's my character's motivation? What does he want? And they really get into it, and then they decide that what, I'm thinking about it from his perspective, and then I didn't hear that, so I'm not going to use that information. My character wasn't there, so I don't know about that. I don't know what's in the next room because that was John's character, and I didn't hear that. So I'm just going to go in there because I didn't know there was a dragon in there. Getting rid of the metagame and worrying about the details and the rules and the specifics and how things happen, and just play the character, let the GM tell a story, and the GM himself has got to get kind of the meta out and then try to get into some characters. And some people are more into running characters than others. Sometimes it takes practice and experience. I'm horrible at some things. I'm good at others. Again, it's about finding your place as a DM and knowing what you're good at. But the metagame, practice on getting that out, and find more enjoyment with everybody at the table. Anybody else want to jump in?
I'll jump in on that. I mean, and it is the point of separating player knowledge from character knowledge. About 2 weeks ago, my players, one kid wanted to go up, and they were fighting a troll. If anyone ever has gone through the Summon of the Citadel, awesome first level adventure for intro for new players. They were fighting a troll, and he said, "Oh, I want to go and cut his Achilles tendon." Okay. So as a rogue, how do you actually know where an Achilles tendon is? Like, do you have this medical knowledge? Can you roll a heal check to make sure that you actually know what part of the body that's going to be in? And also, you got to run up, you got to somehow reach up into the sarcophagus, reach over with your sword, get down, and somehow try to get at the sarc. And it's these things that they think that are just capable of happening because they just say it. And within, the world of fantasy, it can just happen. Anything can happen, which is true. But you got to set those limits for them. The same thing for basing on experience and actually leveling, and especially within 3.5 and 4th edition when you can get feats. the feats should almost make sense. So if they're going to get something that they can plan ahead, and they know that they've encountered undead before, and they're going to somehow get a feat that can help them with that or help them to move along the story, why does this feat make sense? Why would you suddenly just know how to do whirlwind attack or to do your 2-weapon fighting? Did you have the specific training, or did you have this background knowledge before? And maybe at the time where they can get feats, maybe they're at that level, but maybe they don't get those feats until maybe they go back to town. Maybe then they can go to the Fighters Guild, and your fighter can then learn 2-weapon fighting, or your rogue sneaks away to the Thieves Guild, and he can actually learn these various skills for pickpocketing extra, or moving quietly a bit more. Letting them and encouraging them, not hounding them or telling them, separate it now, or you're going to get docked XP, or I'm going to take you down a level. You got to, like Brian was saying, just slowly encourage them to take it away. Have them try to think as their character. Because if they don't, again, it gets annoying, and it does take away from the story. Because if someone has their experience and they're going to create their character, and they know how to build someone up to be completely, unbeatable, it's not fun. And stuff initially won't make sense. For character building, when I ran Tomb of Horrors, I had a player have a perfectly balanced character, ready for the tomb. He was a little of this, a little of that. He was like a mutt. Just this beautiful amalgamation of different classes. And he's like, I'm ready for anything. I'm like, how does this even make sense? You have a barbarian with a wizard, and then suddenly you go into monk. And then you're back to fighter and rogue and wizard. Like, where is your law and order coming from your monk? And did you lose it? And now that it's gone, do you lose your monk abilities? Did you suddenly just jump from junior college to junior college, and then you went to this, fraternity dorm, and you came back for this pep rally, and man, you're ready for this fight. How does your character make sense?
And with that, I like to make all my players, I'm like, just tell me how, explain how your character gets to what he gets.
Yep.
And I can be a pain on the ass as a DM, and I expect when they start, I'm like, you can have whatever skill, whatever power, whatever ability, you just need to tell me where and how you got it. Every single one. Did you learn pickpockets? I don't care. How did you learn it? Tell me your character's background, who taught him, what was the guy's name, what was the situation that led to it, and then it actually forces them to write a background with me never telling them to write a background. And they start to go, well, where did my character figure this out? Well, where did he learn that? Then they start to think more and more about the character, and then they start to go put themselves in their character's shoes. And it helps a lot. And I'm like, whatever class you want to play, like I say, don't just say no, determine difficulty, but throw it at me and we'll see if we can work with it. Like, I normally stick to core races in a game, in my D&D games. I throw out monks, barbarians, and bards. And I stick to Tolkien-esque type of races. Well, at one point, one guy asked, and he was going to join the game, he hadn't joined yet. And he sent me a text message because he was sitting there watching the gameplay. He said, can I join in as a kobold? And normally I said no. But the party was in the middle of raiding a kobold den. And I thought, you know what? I can make this work. And he wanted to be a kobold sorcerer. So I replied to him, hang on, while I was running the game. And then the party went into a room and they found a kobold chained to the wall. And with whip marks all over him. And then they pull him down and he starts talking to him. And I'm role-playing this kobold prisoner. They come to find out that he's a sorcerer, but he does not follow Tiamat. The rest of him, it finally came out that he was not a devout follower like the rest. So they started, torturing him, whipping him into submission. He must worship the queen, and he wouldn't give in. And then that's when I handed it over. I said, now this is so-and-so's character. And so the opportunity was there, but I wasn't going to force it. You can't just play this. It doesn't make any sense. But in this situation, it did. So I'll break my own rules if it fits the game and flows. And then it made perfect sense, and he had some advantages. He knew the layout of the dungeon. He knew where everybody was. They gave us, you're here. Of course you know it. You know it all. But you've never been allowed in this room, so you don't know what's behind there. But you were involved in the summoning of these drakes and the creating of them. You were in the training, so yeah, you actually know the command words to control the drakes that are in the other room. Have fun with that. It was a whole bunch of advantages he didn't even expect. He's like, really? Yeah, because it made sense. If they die, you kind of know how ability to make more even. But find yourself some blue dragon eggs. That's going to be a whole other adventure. But, and I'll give some bennies if it makes sense. And he didn't ask for any of that, but I was like, you know what? I liked it. It was cool. And everyone thought it was amazing because they just, save somebody, and they all wondered if I'd planned that forever, and I just came up with that in 3 minutes. And I said, what am I going to do? Yeah, sure. And just going off the cuff with it.
And I think that's really key too, is like what they were basically talking about, is setting guidelines for your game, but allowing flexibility. It is really key though. You do set guidelines. I mean, we all have specifics, like who doesn't allow certain classes and so forth. And that's really important. And all new DMs, from what I've seen, the mistake they make at the start when they first want to run a game, is they want to run some really wild campaign. Like a lot of times they'll say, "Well, I want to run an all evil campaign." Okay. Well, yeah. Those don't work because evil implies that they have their own,
Their own agenda.
agenda, and they're going to fight with each other. And so you end up in just basically throwing them in an arena and let them fight it out, and the campaign over. So there's certain things that you should and shouldn't do. I mean, you can try it if you want, but we've seen just new DMs, they always do that. Some wild campaigns, some off-the-wall classes and stuff like that. You really got to temper that down. It depends on what your goal is, what you're trying to do with it. It's always about the story. That's the way I look at it. I use milestoning in my campaign for leveling. So it just seems to work better because, it's, like you said, it takes out the metagaming. It's the power of gaming and building characters. You want them to think about the story. That's what you want to get them excited about, and you try to engage them in that. And hopefully their characters are a part of that. And that's really key when you start a party, is making them a direct part of the story. And that's some of the stuff they're doing in 5th edition now, is they have backgrounds and in the adventures have what are called bonds that the character gets that directly connects them. So that, like in Horde of the Dragon Queen, it's like they may have been a cult member in the past and they got out because they didn't like what was happening. And so there's stuff like that you want to get, when you start your games, you want to get them directly involved. So that stops that they're just for themselves. Because it's hard to rein somebody back when they have their own agenda that goes beyond your story. Because it's really about your story. You have to be flexible, but you want to keep it fun for the players. So there's that secret DM rule, or the secret thing that DMs have that, since you're learning to be DMs, is that sometimes you're going to roll the dice and you're going to roll a 20. But guess what? You just roll 1. That players don't always know that happens, and you need to be, that's part of you being a good role player, is that you go, oh my gosh, I just rolled a 1. And you got to be good at, like, okay, that's a bummer. Because there's certain times that that guy's going to die if he does that thing. But you're going to give him a chance. If they keep doing it, then it's whatever they take. You have to understand. Yeah. But that's key. You want to keep the story fun, because if characters are dying like that in your campaign, that's the other thing DMs do, is they make their campaigns overpowered. They throw big bosses at them right off the bat, and they just die. They think that's cool to watch the party die, and it really isn't. You're going to lose your players. Yeah. So that's, part of what we're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. It's sometimes it is letting where the dice roll and fly, but other times modifying it and on the fly, improvising the fact that if you do roll that 20, that character will die, or if you do make that attack and it hits, then that crucial NPC is probably going to die.
Sometimes you can just tell them that.
And and you can say, like, I'm going to give him like 4 extra hit points and he'll be at 1. But you guys kind of need him, so I'm going to let him live. And I've had to do that for my games recently, where an important NPC, they kind of needed it in order to even finish the mission. And sometimes, again, there is that end goal, and you don't want to give them that straight and narrow path. They can veer off and come back, and you want to give them those guidelines. You want to allow them to continue towards that goal. If they want to veer off and go immediately to the right and come back to the overall end game 3 months later, by all means.
You always have to have the excitement of discovery. That's what makes it fun for the players. They have to feel like, we accomplished this, we discovered this. Even though you probably led them there, they have to feel like they got there.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, if anybody's played like Skyrim or Fallout, there is an end game mission to complete. It's either to take out Mr. House, or it's to save the king and kill the overall dragon. But it's an open world, and you can just go anywhere. And you realize, oh yeah, I'm like 60. I'm gonna take down that level 2 house now. But you're still finishing the mission. You're still finishing that story arc. And that's what's important, is the fact that they can go off and do what they want. They can still have fun. They can become the characters that they are.
When it comes to being a GM, like you said, and making adjustments behind the screen, I'll do it on occasion, and I never let know when it's done. And it's only a very small percentage of the time, because you never want the party to think that they don't have control. Because for the most part, they do. And I'll never, like if I'm rolling combat, for example, I'll never hit anyone that my dice don't do. Combat, I'm never going to have a player die because I fudged something. That'll never happen. But I might say, no, he's not going to crit you. Like, they've said, I don't want you guys just to die that easy. I'll give you one bit. But if a second one comes up, fate's saying you're dead, you're going to have to make a new character. Now, there's other things I like to do. I like to make tension, but I don't want to kill the party. So they're attacking this griffin. They've knocked him down to 0 hit points. I'm like, this is not very epic battle. He's still alive. And so they attack him again. And I'm like, he's still up. My God, this thing's got a lot of hit points. He's there forever. I'm like, 6 rounds later. But the thing I also do is